Anyways, thank you for the introduction. Sorry for the delay, but yes, as Dr. Munsell mentioned, today I'll be talking a little bit about the effects of peripartum fat-soluble vitamin supplementation and the effects on beef cattle. Oops, what is it doing? Oh, okay. So, to give a brief overview, first I will be discussing the importance of vitamins A, D, and E, and their role in physiological functions as well as in the immune system. And then I'll be discussing current recommendations of each of these vitamins and then recent research that has been conducted looking at these vitamins and their effects in beef cattle specifically. So this is just a structure of retinol, which is vitamin A. Then we have vitamin D3, and then alpha tocopherol, which is a form of vitamin E. So why are fat-soluble vitamins important, or why should we care? So vitamins A, D, and E play a role in many important physiological functions, including growth, reproduction, and immunity. Lack of any of these vitamins in the early stages of life can have a significant impact on the productivity of the animal long term. So, for example, vitamin D plays a critical role in proper bone development. And the image shown up here represents a calf that was born to a dam that was vitamin D deficient. So it resulted in the calf being born with malformed legs. And this is just one example of what a vitamin deficiency can cause early on in life. For this reason, it's important that cattle are receiving adequate amounts of these vitamins, especially during the late gestation and the early lactation periods, because those are critical time points. For calves, their immune system is established when they receive passive transfer of immunity through their mother's colostrum. So it's critical that they are receiving colostrum that has adequate levels of these vitamins. So now that I've provided kind of a general overview of why these vitamins are important, I'll cover each of them individually in more detail and talk about their role in physiology. So starting with vitamin A, vitamin A is critical for many functions, including growth, reproduction, just to name a few. It also plays a pretty major role in vision, cell differentiation, and antibody production. So in this diagram shown here, it kind of shows how vitamin A is obtained and then used in the body. So beta carotene is one of the major precursors to vitamin A, and it can be obtained in the diet. So upon being ingested, beta carotene is converted into retinol, which is vitamin A. And then from this point, it can go a couple different ways. So retinol can be converted into retinol esters, which can then be stored into the liver for whenever they'd be needed. If serum retinol starts running low, the liver can just reconvert the retinol esters back to retinol to kind of keep the levels steady. Or retinol can be converted to retinal, which is then converted to 11-cis-retinal, which is the chromophore for rhodopsin, which actually plays a role in vision. So if there's a disruption in this pathway, it can lead to issues with vision or night blindness also. Another way it can go is retinal can be converted to retinoic acid, and then retinoic acid plays a role in signaling properties. So let's see. So now we're going to discuss a little bit about vitamin A toxicity and deficiency. I'll start by discussing deficiency. So the most common sign of vitamin A deficiency is loss of vision and night blindness. However, deficiency can also lead to compromised immune function as well as reproductive issues. One of the first studies that looked at the effects of vitamin A deficiency occurred almost 100 years ago in 1926. So this kind of indicates that knowledge of vitamin A deficiency and the importance of providing enough vitamin A in the diet has been around for a while. So the image shown here is from that study, and it features twin dairy calves that were fed the same vitamin A deficient diet. The calf on the right was supplemented with a vitamin A source, whereas the calf on the left was not. And we can kind of see that there is a pretty significant difference in growth and just overall thriftiness of these calves. So due to the severe deficiency, the calf on the left ended up becoming completely blind by the end of the study. And this is just kind of like an extreme case of what vitamin A deficiency can do. So vitamin A deficiency is most likely to occur during instances where there is limited access to fresh forages or if feedstuffs are not stored properly. So cattle are capable of storing vitamin A in their liver for approximately 2 to 4 months. But once storages are depleted, deficiency will begin to occur. Calves are actually at the highest risk of having a vitamin A deficiency, especially those that do not receive adequate colostrum at birth or if they are in heavy stress environments. It's unlikely, in regards to toxicity, it is unlikely that toxicity would occur because rumen microorganisms are actually capable of breaking down excess vitamin A, thus reducing the risk of toxicity. So moving on to vitamin D. Vitamin D is essential for many physiological functions. Most importantly, absorption of calcium and phosphorus, normal bone mineralization, and mobilization of calcium from bone. It also plays a role in immunity. So vitamin D can be obtained in the diet or through UVB exposure. So this diagram shown here represents how vitamin D3 can be obtained and used within the body. So up at the top, so this is the liver. We have vitamin D3 that's obtained from either the diet or from UVB exposure. And it is converted into 25-hydroxyvitamin D3 through the enzyme 25-hydroxylase. And then from the liver, it can go out into the body. And 25-hydroxyvitamin D3 is the inactive metabolite. However, it is the best indicator of serum vitamin D levels in the body. In the renal endocrine pathway, 25-hydroxyvitamin D3 can be converted to its active metabolite, which is 125-hydroxyvitamin D. And this happens through the CYP27B1 gene, which produces the enzyme 1-alpha hydroxylase. So, and this happens in the kidney. And then the active metabolite, 125-hydroxyvitamin D, can go out into the body and do various metabolic processes. One of the major things it does in the body is it plays a major role in calcium homeostasis. Alternatively, 25-hydroxyvitamin D can be activated by the immune system through the immune endocrine pathway. This image over here represents a macrophage, which is a type of immune cell. And we see again that 25-hydroxyvitamin D3 is converted to its active metabolite, 125-hydroxyvitamin D, through the same gene, CYP27B1, which produces the enzyme 1-alpha hydroxylase. And this all happens, the activation happens within, this is just an example, within a macrophage in response to pathogen signaling. So in regards to toxicity and deficiency, we'll start with deficiency again. Typical signs of vitamin D deficiency include stiff joints, brittle bones. It can also cause loss of appetite and weakness and weight loss. The calf represented here shows typical signs of vitamin D deficiency. In regions that have adequate sunlight throughout the year, vitamin D deficiency likely will not be an issue. However, in areas that do not receive sufficient sunlight exposure, dietary vitamin D may need to be supplemented in order to avoid deficiency. One example of this, or for example, dairy calves that are housed indoors and not supplemented with vitamin D are at an increased risk for deficiency because not only are they not receiving it from their diet, but they also don't have the UVB exposure. So in regards to toxicity, vitamin D toxicity can occur if too much vitamin D is consumed in the diet. This can lead to loss of appetite and decreased growth. And in extreme cases, it can cause calcification and eventually lead to death. So switching over to vitamin E. Vitamin E acts as an antioxidant and supports immune function. It also plays a role in the formation of membranes and the function and structure of muscles. Studies have indicated that injections of vitamin E in the form of alpha tocopherol resulted in improved vitamin E content as well as oxidative burst capacity of neutrophils. So the schematic shown here represents vitamin E's role in various immune cell subsets. So for instance, in macrophages, alpha tocopherol has been shown to decrease the nitric oxide levels. And nitric oxide is a free radical, which can cause muscle degeneration. Also, alpha tocopherol has been shown to increase the antibody response in B cells, which are involved in humoral immunity. Clinical vitamin E deficiency manifests in muscles. As I previously mentioned, vitamin E acts as an antioxidant. This means that it plays a role in controlling the amount of free radicals that are circulating in tissues. In the case of deficiency, an excess of free radicals will be present, resulting in oxidative damage to cells. White muscle disease is most commonly associated with vitamin E deficiency. And is usually made worse when it's paired with a selenium deficiency or pro-oxidant lipids. So to this point, we have established the physiological roles that vitamins A, D, and E play in the body, and we talked about their importance. So now we can take a look at the current recommendations of each of them and then discuss how they can be acquired. So according to the National Research Council, the values represented here represent the amount of vitamins A, D, and E needed in order to maintain normal physiological function. So the amounts of each of these will vary based on what stage of life the animal is in and what their nutritional requirements are at that time. For instance, a lactating cow is going to require a higher vitamin intake than a heifer who is in her early stages of pregnancy. So you may be wondering, where can cattle obtain each of these vitamins from, and at what point should supplementation be considered? So during the spring and summer months, supplementation may not be necessary, especially if cattle have access to good quality forages. Vitamins A and E can be obtained from high quality pastures and hay, and it can be found pretty plentifully in fresh forages. And vitamin E is naturally acquired from UVB exposure, which in Florida, we have plenty of UVB exposure. During the winter months, however, is where we run into issues with potential deficiency. Fresh forages will tend to be scarce. Therefore, cattle are typically provided with grass or legume hay. And hay will tend to have a lower carotene and alpha tocopherol content than the fresh product. And this is mainly due to degeneration of the vitamins caused by oxidation after the grass has been harvested. It's estimated that hay will lose about 6 to 7% of carotene content per month after it's harvested, and improper storage can actually result in a greater loss. Furthermore, during the winter months, the intensity of UVB exposure tends to be decreased even in Florida. So shown here are a couple of graphs that show the vitamin A content in various feedstuffs. The top graph represents the vitamin A equivalent in international units per kilogram of dry matter in fescue pasture, corn silage, and a couple different hays, including orchard grass, fescue, and alfalfa hay. And then the bottom graph represents the beta carotene content in micrograms per gram of dry matter in a few different tropical grasses, including 2 cultivars of Bermuda grass, which are Florokirk and Tifton 85, as well as Florona stargrass. So in regards to the beta carotene, it's estimated that 1 milligram is equivalent to about 400 international units of vitamin A. And then the key point with these graphs is to show that animals provided with fresh forages are getting plenty of vitamin A just from grazing on fresh pastures alone. As we can see in the top graph, the fescue pasture, which is a fresh grass, clearly has much more vitamin A content than the silage and the hays. And And then similarly with vitamin E, cattle should be able to obtain plenty of vitamin E from grazing on fresh pastures. So shown here is a graph of the alpha tocopherol content in various tropical grasses, including the 2 types of Bermuda grass, the Florokirk and the Tifton 85, as well as Pensacola bahia grass and Florona stargrass. And again, it's estimated that 1 milligram of alpha tocopherol is equivalent to about 1.49 international units of vitamin E. So that comes out to approximately 400 to 500 international units of vitamin E just from consuming these particular tropical grasses alone. So now I'm going to transition into some recent research that has been conducted looking at the roles of vitamins A, D, and E and the role that they play in beef cattle specifically. So for this first study, the objective was to evaluate the vitamin D status of beef cows and calves across seasons and geographical locations. So cow-calf herds in Minnesota, Florida, and Idaho were enrolled in this experiment, and samples were collected to observe the levels of 25 hydroxyvitamin D in both cows and calves across locations and in different seasons. So for cows, the serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D status was evaluated in regards to location, which can be seen in this top graph. Additionally, it was evaluated among all cows on the study, as we can see in this bottom graph. On average, it was found that the concentrations of 25 hydroxyvitamin D fell between 40 to 80 nanograms per milliliter at the time of calving, and the average was around 60 nanograms per milliliter, as we can see more clearly in this bottom graph. For calves, the serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels should be around 30 nanograms per milliliter at birth. And this graph represents, this red dotted line represents where calves should be lying. However, as we can see from this study, a majority of the calves fell below this ideal line, and the average was 15 nanograms per milliliter, but a lot of calves fell below 10. And then previous studies have indicated that serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels for feedlot cattle have declined below the ideal amounts during the winter months, which can be seen in this graph down here. Again, this red line represents the ideal intake line, and then here is where they're kind of below that ideal number. So this study saw that in the summer months, there was an increase in the serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels in both Florida and Minnesota. And the study concluded that increasing the supplementation of vitamin D to cows during the winter months would be beneficial for their calves. So in this next experiment, the question was raised to see if vitamin A, D, and E injections would have an effect on the fat-soluble vitamin status of beef calves. So for the experimental design, calves from 2 different herds were enrolled. There were Angus calves from Minnesota and both Angus and Brangus calves from Florida, and they were assigned to one of 2 treatments. They either received, the control group received no treatment, and the supplemented group received an injection of Vital E Newborn, which contained retinol palmitate, vitamin D3, and alpha tocopherol. And then samples were collected from the calves at various time points from both of the herds. So the following graphs will show the data from the Minnesota calves. Starting with vitamin A, we can see that there's no major difference in the levels of serum retinol between the control and the supplemented groups. For vitamin D, we can see that there is an initial increase in serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels for the supplemented group compared to the control group. And then finally, for vitamin E, we can see that there is an initial increase in the serum alpha tocopherol levels for the supplemented group. However, it declines as the animal ages. So this study concluded that the supplementation of fat-soluble vitamins resulted in an increased serum alpha tocopherol and serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels in calves. So moving forward, the question was raised on if the vitamin status and performance of cows and calves would be improved if cows were supplemented with vitamins A, D, and E peripartum. So for this experiment, 56 crossbred cows from the North Florida Research and Education Center were enrolled, and they were separated by age and assigned randomly to one of 3 treatments. The control group received a mineral supplement containing retinol acetate and vitamin D3. The vitamin 1 group received the control diet plus an additional amount of retinol acetate and vitamin D3, and then they were also supplemented with alpha tocopherol acetate. And the vitamin 2 group received beta-carotene, 25 hydroxyvitamin D3, and alpha tocopherol acetate. The cows on this study were fed free choice Bermuda grass hay, and they were also fed cottonseed meal that was top dressed with their supplement. And they were given this diet from 250 days of gestation to 60 days postpartum. And then samples were collected from both the cows and the calves at various time points. So for vitamin D, there was an increase in the serum 25 hydroxyvitamin D levels in the cows on the vitamin 2 treatment group. And for the calves, there was an increase in the serum 25 hydroxy D levels on both the vitamin 1 and vitamin 2 treatment groups. For vitamin E, the alpha tocopherol levels were consistent across treatments for the cows. However, in the calves, there was an increase in the alpha tocopherol serum levels for vitamin 1 and vitamin 2 treatment groups in comparison to the control. For vitamin A, there was no change in the levels of serum retinol between treatments for the cows or the calves. And finally, for beta-carotene, there was an increase in the serum beta-carotene levels for the vitamin 2 treatment group of the cows and also for the calves. So this study concluded that supplementing beta-carotene, vitamin D, and vitamin E during the late gestation and early lactation period improves the fat-soluble vitamin status of beef calves. So this next experiment was actually part of the previous experiment that I just talked about. However, its goal was to determine if fat-soluble vitamins fed to cows peripartum had an effect on the immune status of the calves. So for the experimental design, it was the same in regards to treatments. It was, again, the crossbred cows from the North Florida Research and Education Center. control diet was the mineral supplement containing retinol acetate and vitamin D3. The vitamin 1 group was the control diet plus additional retinol acetate, additional vitamin D, and then it also contained alpha tocopherol acetate. And then the vitamin 2 group received the control diet plus beta carotene, 25 hydroxy vitamin D3, and alpha tocopherol acetate, and they were fed the same thing. And then samples were collected from cows and calves at various time points to look at the serum IgG levels, as well as the peripheral blood leukocytes, including CD11b, CD14, and CD62L. So the peripheral blood leukocytes were analyzed at a few different markers. The monocyte CD14 expression was greater in the vitamin 1 and the vitamin 2 supplemented groups at 7 days of age. However, at 30 days, greater than the control. However, at 30 days of age, they were less than the control. And for the neutrophil CD11b expression, it followed the same pattern where the supplemented calves had greater expression at 7 days of age, but less at 30. In regards to IgG status, IgG1 decreased in the vitamin 1 and the vitamin 2 groups in comparison to the control calves. So from this study, it was concluded that peripartum supplementation of vitamins A, D, and E to beef cows alters the cellular and humoral immunity of the calves. So based upon the previous experiments and knowing that calves have an increased risk of fat-soluble vitamin deficiency, we wanted to take a closer look at the effects on the immune system. So this is where my project comes into place. So the objective of this experiment was to see if supplementing cows with fat-soluble vitamins peripartum would have an effect on the concentrations of IgG1, IgG2, IgA, as well as the peripheral blood leukocyte profiles of their calves. We hypothesized that grazing on only winter pastures may result in inadequate amounts of fat-soluble vitamins, leading to insufficient transfer of fat-soluble vitamins and impaired immune status of the calves. So for the experimental design, 226 pregnant beef cows from the University of Florida multi-breed Angus Brahma herd at the Santa Fe unit were enrolled 30 days prepartum and supplemented until 60 days postpartum. Cows were grouped into 3 calving groups based on their age and expected calving date, and then they were then blocked based on breed group and assigned to one of 2 pens within the calving groups for a total of 6 pens. Cows were supplemented with one of 2 treatments. The control cows received a vitamin mineral mix containing retinol acetate and vitamin D3, and the supplemented group received the control diet plus additional retinol acetate, 25 hydroxy vitamin D3, and alpha tocopherol acetate. Blood was sampled at birth and 3 months of age from 103 calves for serum IgG and analysis of peripheral blood leukocytes. And analysis of these results is still being done. So to summarize, vitamins A, D, and E are important for many physiological functions and have shown to play a role in growth, reproduction, and immunity. I discussed the current recommendations for each of the vitamins and emphasized the importance of receiving adequate amounts because deficiency can lead to significant issues. Finally, I shared with you some research that has been conducted looking at vitamin D status across geographical locations, the effects of injectable fat-soluble vitamins, and finally, the effects of peripartum fat-soluble vitamin supplementation on both immune status and immunity. And with that, I will take any questions anyone may have.
Does anyone have questions for Brittany? Well, I have a question. So,
okay.
what are you expecting to find in terms of the cellular outcomes that you're looking at on?
So honestly, I'm kind of expecting it to be similar to kind of these results, is kind of what I would expect. But we'll see what happens.
So how do the levels of supplementation compare in that study to what you're doing in your study?
Well, let me see. I'm doing less, I think. Hold on. Nope, it's the same. It should be about the same.
Yep.
No, it's a little less. My bad. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe not as much of a. Maybe it won't be as high, I suppose. I don't know. We'll just. Yeah, I'm not sure. I will have to look into that actually.
That's all right. And there is a question in the chat for you from Anna. She says, my question to Brittany is that if she thinks the effects in the immune system of calves are more related to fetal programming or colostrum composition, like the effects that you see related to how the deficiencies in these vitamins might affect newborn calves through the dam.
What? Hold on. What was it again? I'm sorry.
She asks whether effects on the immune system of calves are more related to fetal programming or colostrum composition, like that maternal effects on the calves' immune system.
I feel like colostrum composition would play a pretty big role in it, especially since that's how they receive their passive transfer of immunity. I don't know much about fetal programming at all, but I will definitely look into that and see if that would have an effect on it. Because I'm honestly not sure. But that's a really good question that I didn't even think about, honestly.
Okay. Thank you. And there's one more question from Brittany Deal. She says, do you know if there is variability based on different breeds in addition to geographical location in vitamin concentrations?
I'm not sure about that. Again, I would have to ask about it. I'm assuming there might be, but I don't know how significant it would be. But yeah, I will look into that as well and see.
And yep, she says thank you.
Oh,
just curious.
You're welcome.
So that is all the chat messages that we have.
Okay.
So if nobody else has questions for Brittany, we'll call it a day today. Thanks everybody for attending, and good luck, Brittany, with the rest of your research, getting it.
Thank you.
Out there, and hopefully seeing some interesting results out of that.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I'm excited to see what we find. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much. And we'll see everybody later. See everybody next week. We do have a seminar next week as well. So I'll be sending out that announcement this afternoon. Thank you.